Okay, so there's a lot of brisket trimming videos out there, but none from a point of view, which for some beginners, I think a point of view would be a really good kind of tool or helpful way of brisket trimming here. So I've got a prime brisket that I'm going to cook for the Super Bowl, and I wanted to go ahead and do just a pretty standard trim, nothing too crazy, nothing competition style, nothing overly complicated, something that pretty intermediate to experienced and even beginner cook could do. So we can go over the anatomy here. We'll get this opened up. And I like to make my cut to open up the plastic on the fat side here because we're gonna go ahead and trim this up. And I know that when I was first starting out, first learning how to trim briskets and learning how to do different types of trims, whether it be competition style, restaurant, backyard style, all kinds of stuff, I thought to myself, you know, hey, this is a great video, it's got a good view, but I can't see what he's doing with his hands, or I can't see how he's holding the knife, or I can't see, you know, X, Y, and Z. So hopefully that's what we can accomplish here today. So, little brisket anatomy. This is the meat side, is what I like to call it, the meat side. We have all the red meat and everything right here. And then we have the fat side, right? So those are the sides. Now let's get into the two different types, or I wouldn't say types, but two different parts of the brisket. So over here towards the end, you can see we got this big fat cap. This is our point side, and this is our flat side. So as you can see, a brisket, it kind of overlays like that, like on top of each other, and they're like kind of staggered. So as these two pieces are running together, we've got to be able to trim them and get them to where they can kind of be pretty round and even and more, I guess, aerodynamic is the word. All right, that's the main goal. So what I like to do is get my brisket fresh out of the fridge so it's nice and cold, just like this. And I like to work it on the fat side first. Point or flat, doesn't matter. So long as we're on the fat side, because when the fat is cold like it is now, it's easier to cut. So I've got my trimming knife here. It's just a little basic, really sharp boning knife. It's got a little bit of a flex to it, and I like that because it helps me work through the meat here. So the first thing I like to do is take off, I guess, what you would call the mohawk, and generally that's this piece right here. That piece, depending on the brisket, can actually be bigger or smaller. This one is pretty flat, so there isn't much to take out of. And the way that I'm gonna trim, I'm feeding about 9 people or so. I've got quite a bit of real estate to work with. So what I'm gonna do is just start by getting it more uniform and just start cutting this out. All of these hard fats, right? So over here, softer fat. Over here, I mean, that's just hard fat. None of this is gonna render. We can cut all of that out. So as I start to work it, like you can see it right here, this funky little bubbly little separation here. Some of it's hard, some of it's soft. The hard stuff we want to get rid of because it doesn't render. I mean, I guess you could keep it and put it in a pan for like some tallow or something if you want to make some tallow. So I'm just going to start working out this mohawk. And for those who might be just now learning to do a brisket for the first time, you can take your time and remember that, you know, you can, you know, work it tiny cut at a time. A lot of times you watch these videos and it's someone super experienced and they've probably cut like 1,000,000 briskets in their time. And so it looks like they're taking big chunks off at a time, which is kind of like what I'm doing. Don't be intimidated by that. That's just know that that's, you know, it comes with time and experience. And over time, you know, yourself will be there. And I've learned that, you know, sacrificing a little bit more meat is okay, because I, for one, have a grinder, and one of my favorite things to do after trimming a brisket is saving all those trims, grinding it up, and making burgers. That is some of the best burger you're ever gonna have. Okay, now that we've kind of got that mohawk, you can see here, pretty level. Looks good enough for me. I'll come back and clean this up later. I want to take off this part. You could tell all this gray meat, it's hard, it's rocky, it's ugly, it's unedible. There's really nothing you can do with it. Some people call this making bacon. Don't know who came up with that, but the idea is we just want to cut this whole section out, because it won't eat. It's not gonna make for a good brisket, so we'll cut all of this out, and I'll leave off to the side. And you can see I've got this kind of almost 90 degree, this edge here. We're gonna fix that later. Remember, like I said earlier, we want aerodynamics, and this is not aerodynamic. We'll round that off here in a little bit, and I'll show that later. This is another big hard fat we can get rid of. And what I'm doing is, as I'm working these, if you take the knife and you cut, I'm not cutting straight. I'm cutting kind of like, depending on what I'm needing to do, either down and in at a kind of an angle, or down and up kind of out of an angle, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm kind of coming up with the knife right here. And you see how I started thick and I ended thin? Because I came in and I'm scalloping, or I'm scooping that knife. I'm kind of doing this motion to kind of really exaggerate it. And then I'm bringing it up as I finish. Because, actually we don't need that. Because what I want to do is, I want to make sure that when I come out, that I can round this off. This needs to all be round. I'm only going to get this flat. This big fat cap here, this where it is right here on the meat side, there's only going to be so much of that I can take out. So, all right, so remember the goal here is just get a nice, even, uniform shape, right? And then as you're cutting the brisket, you can kind of feel with your hand, right? And you'll feel the lumps and the bumps and what's kind of soft like this that just came off with my hands, didn't even need a knife. All that stuff, if it can come off with your hands, silver skin, all these little fat globs, get them out of there. If it was a competition kind of brisket, you'd probably take almost all of that off. But that's not what I need to do. I'm not going to waste all that time, because, you know, I'm just cooking this for my friends and family. So, all right, so just kind of finish up that little piece, and we'll finish what I was talking about earlier, this bacon. As you can see, we made that cut. You see this beautiful section of meat here, and then you can see how this part's just super ugly. We want it all to look like this, right? So we'll just kind of keep working it out right here. And I'm just kind of making squared cuts, because I know I'm going to come back and round that off later. So this little piece I want to get rid of here right now. Right, and the key to this is having a very sharp, thin, flexible knife. I've seen people trim brisket with brisket cutters, chef knives, all kinds of stuff. I mean, you could do that, especially if that's all you have, but I prefer this. I think this is easier for both beginners and experts alike. Okay, that looks pretty good. Just round this big fat cap off right here. So these big caps like this, that would be excellent, like for tallow. And then all of this stuff I'll cut back out and repurpose for burger later. I don't think I need any of this. This right here, I could use though. That'll make a pretty good burger. Okay, back to the brisket. You can kind of see what I'm doing as I'm feeling or shaping the brisket. What I'm doing is I'm feeling for what I need to cut, but I'm also looking for anything that's out of the ordinary. Okay, so we've got our bacon cut. I don't need to waste time with this. We're gonna go back to the fat side. Like I said, you wanna trim your fat side first and essentially work the fat while it's still cold, because as it's cold, it's easier to cut. So we can see here, you can see where it's all red right here. That's where we've cut the mohawk out. Those are gonna be all your marbled cuts. I'm just gonna just round that off too real quick, just because it's there. Okay, and I can see it's kind of starting to take shape. Now, what we want to do here, now, this will be kind of personal preference, but for me, I know it's a prime brisket, they're a little expensive, but for me, that's not a problem. I want even fat cap, right? So you see here on the left where my finger is, this is a lot higher, and towards the middle, it gets a little lower. And towards the end out here again, it gets a little higher again. The goal here is you want your fat to be consistently the same. For most people, that's 1/4 of an inch. The way that I can kind of judge or eyeball 1/4 of an inch is I take my thumbnail right here, and from the top of the thumbnail to the bottom of the nail, to me, eyeballing it, that's about 1/4 of an inch. So I'll put the bottom of my thumbnail on the meat, and I'll look at the top nail, and I gotta basically cut this section in half. So we'll start with that. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can attack this. What I like to do is I go with the flow of the brisket. So I'll shape the brisket out. I see it's going this way, so I'm gonna start trimming out that way. And again, I'm using the knife very sharp. I'm not really having to try hard at all. I'm letting the weight of my hand just take it down. And I'm gonna do this very little strokes at a time, right? You can get impatient and kind of really dig in to take more fat out at once, but you risk scalping the brisket, right? You'll cut too deep and you'll expose some of the meat, and it'll kind of look like this. Here on the mohawk, that's okay because I removed it, but everywhere else, except right here, it came that way. We're gonna cut that out. It should all be covered in fat, so. All right, I kind of need to work a little faster here because the brisket is starting to get to warming up. And you can know that as you're cutting the fat and it starts to become, more wet in the hand, more goopy, it becomes a little bit harder to work with. If that happens to you, don't panic. You can, if you have a big pan or sorts, you can just stick it back in the fridge, give it some time to cool up, take it back out, rework it, right? If you have enough time, go for it, all right? Especially if it's your first time and you're cooking for a bunch of people and you've kind of already told them, oh yeah, I'm cooking brisket and I know what I'm doing and I'm such a badass and pro at this and that. Yeah, if that's you, you need to give yourself at least 4 hours of advanced time. Give yourself that much of a head start and just take your time, really. A lot of people would say that the trim of the brisket is not the most important thing. There's people that have made videos of like taking briskets and not trimming them at all, and they've come out tasty, and that's great. I kind of, although I acknowledge that's true, I disagree, and I think trimming is super important. That's kind of more or less why I'm making this video, because a lot of competition people, right, who want to make the best barbecue they can, they spend hours on their trim. They work this thing like it's a work of art, like a painting, just stroking it over and over and over until they get it right. Okay, so as we can see, we're coming along. That's looking good right here. So I'm just gonna fix this part right here. And what I'm doing is, it's kind of hard to see in the video, but the part where I haven't cut yet is a darker color, and the fat that I have trimmed is white. So that kind of helps me locate where I am on the brisket. That way I'm not over or under trimming. So I know I've worked this area really good. I'm just gonna finish these ends and then start working this center out. And I hope I'm not going too fast for some people, because I know they're trying to they might be following along, or you're watching this at home and you've got one hand on the video and one hand on the phone, on the knife. But I assure you, I just gotta speed up a bit because I don't want my brisket to be hard to work with. What some other people might do is if like they're trying to trim, if they can't work it down, they'll actually put their hand underneath it and kind of elevate it, and they can work it like that. That's another option that'll help you. Gotta be careful, I don't want to cut this too thin. Throw some of these fats in there. Some of these fats are pretty good. That'll make some beautiful burgers. You can make burgers, sausage. That's more or less why I'm okay with some people that might be a lot, like a pretty aggressive trim. But that's the way I do it because I have the ability to save all of this stuff and reuse it, right? I'm not really throwing money away. I mean, I'm a big hunter and I like to respect any animal I take. And although I didn't take this, this was bought at the grocery store, I still want to just utilize everything the animal has to offer. Okay. Okay, I'm getting there. This one might need to come down a little bit like this. So I kind of had to make a little bit of a line because some of this is starting to overlap. Again, I want a uniform cut down this way and around in the curves. So, okay. Let's see. So this is looking good. Kind of want to keep working this little area right here a little bit. Cool. Almost got myself right there. Got to be careful. Sharp knife. I have cut myself several times with this knife. It gives and it takes, and you've got to be careful. But working with a sharp knife is a lot safer than a dull knife, for sure. Okay, it's a good piece. Okay, I kind of need to fix that too. Good piece. I don't really like the way this looks. Get rid of it. Okay, we'll start working out the center. And this is where your hand really comes helpful, because sometimes getting these center cuts, these center trims are a little tricky. And this brisket just came like this. This area right here, this is gonna create a pocket when I cook. And that's gonna have a bark forming issue, but unfortunately that's just the way it came butchered. So there's really not a whole lot I can do about that. And another thing I want to do is I want to make sure everything's leveled, right? Some people will trim their briskets kind of opposite I'm doing, and they'll just work them down like this. And by all means, if that works for you, give that a shot. But for me, I work it this way. Okay, I'm thinking that center is about as good as I'm gonna get it. Okay. Try to take a big little chunk out of this too. Don't really need all that. This is good though, we'll keep this. Okay. Still working that fat side. Okay. This is a really, here's another good time to show you. Let me clean this up. So, you can see our edges here look good. Almost perfect, not quite. That should help. Great, so we've got a good edge right here. It's starting to come together. You can see it from when we started. This I want to fix too. Okay, starting to take shape here. Okay, this is just where the brisket gets really funky. Every brisket's going to be different. Some are going to be pretty great out the box. Some of them are just going to be like, holy hell, who butchered this thing? They need to be fired. Like, you know, or I don't know. I mean, I'm not a butcher, but I've seen some fair share, some stuff here. Okay, now we're going to work the meat side, all right? So we've got, as you can see, it's a lot thicker here and a lot thinner here. And that's not going to cook evenly. And even if we look at our, again, this is the point, this is the flat. When we look at our flat, the right side is so much bigger than the left, right? And this is a prime brisket, and I've noticed that this is kind of common with some primes. There's so much marbling that you get, like, if you look at my brisket, like it's like 80% of the brisket is a point and the rest is a flat. So when I'm trimming this, I'll almost be left with just point. I mean, for some people, they don't care. That's mostly what they eat anyway, but I enjoy all of it. So I really want to have as much point as I can. But the problem is that this just won't cook right. So what you do, if you skip this part, if you just say, you know what, I don't want to lose this, I got a lot of people to feed, you can, right? You can just cook it as is, right? Even though we're not done, but you could cook it as is and leave this intact. But what's going to happen is as the brisket's cooking, this little piece, everything's going to pool and all the liquid's going to run down this way. And then what's going to happen is, because this is the shortest link, it's the weakest link, it's going to curl up and it's just going to burn and just become just junk, right? This part's good and thick. That's going to make a great bite. So what I want to do is I'm going to try and even this out the best I can. So I'm going to start small. Get rid of what I know I can get rid of. And what I want to do is start working this into be almost a circular motion. Get rid of a little bit of that. And that way it can take shape. All right. So I just take my hand and I feel it, feel how soft it is. I'm gonna have to make a little bit of a sacrifice right here just for the sake of uniformity. Good piece. And as you can see, you see how it's just wiggling around when I try to cut it? That's just because the brisket is getting room temp, you know. It's, again, if this is a problem for you, you're struggling, just throw it back in the fridge, get it cooled down. That'll make it easier to trim. Okay. So now what we're going to do is kind of match that same energy. I'm going to cut this way out. Boom. Okay. Now you can see what we're working with now. We've got this big round area, and that's what you want to see, right? When you take your brisket, you want this to be almost circular. Okay, what I really, really want to do is just cut this whole part out. But if I do that, I'm left with basically no point. So I think it's just the luck of the draw. It's just the brisket I've been dealt with. So I'm probably just going to have to just leave it. So let's check the fat side right here. Nice and thin. Work this back. It's a little area I forgot to do the first time. Not a problem. Okay. We can see our brisket is taking shape here. Round off this sharp edge. Now this is the deckle, and this part here, there's only, you can dig and dig and dig. It's going to be just pure fat. So we're basically going to leave most of this like that. What I'll try to do is get it pretty uniform. cut off any overhanging parts like that, just to help it lay. And again, brisket is warming up and it is just being harder to cut, but I think we're just about done. So here's our finished product, right? If I could guesstimate, I started with a 12-pound brisket and I've got at least 2 pounds cut off. I'd say maybe 3, right? And now this is my personal preference and experience, but I think smaller briskets cook better. And when I mean smaller briskets, I mean 13 to 15 pound max, right? If you go to a lot of top barbecue joints, especially in Texas, and they take out briskets and they put them right on the cutting board and they're cutting them to serve like brand new fresh brisket. Most of their briskets they're working with are 8 or 9 pounds. And because they're getting them at like 10 or 12 and they're just taking them down. I just believe that's one of the tricks, one of the secrets of barbecue, or at least with good brisket, is smaller. It's the same thing with turkey, right? I think a young 10-pound, 12-pound turkey tastes better than a giant 20-pound. Same thing with briskets. I would not buy a 20-pound brisket to feed a bunch of people. I would buy 2 10s and do it like that, because I think they trim better, they cook better, they cook faster, they're more efficient. I think they just taste better. So I think we're just about done with our trim. And I really hope this video gave you a different perspective of how trimming a brisket works, and you can kind of see things from a point of view that you've probably never seen before. And this might help you a lot. Maybe it'll help you identify what you've been struggling with. And the only thing really left to do is part of the trim, right? I think our fat side's pretty good. It's nice and round. I think the only thing we got left to do here is just finish up the imperfections, right? So like this little thing, right? I'll throw that in there. This little thing, get rid of any of these sharp edges. This one's a little sharp. And that's just me being picky, so. And then we can start working on all these little bits of silver skin. Now, like I said, I'm not going to waste time getting it perfect, but I will try to get off most that I can. Just kind of work these little things, get them right out. Just gonna feel my brisket, make sure it feels which way it's going. It's feeling really good. And as you're feeling the brisket, you can sometimes kind of pick up these little pieces and they'll just come off with your fingers, really, like this. And if you can feel them, these little flaps, just yank them out, right? And that helps. You know, I try to get as much as I can until I get bored of it or I run out of time, or if I just think that's enough. Okay. Just be careful that when you're trying to attack some of these little bits, you don't want to leave any holes or dips or unwanted little valleys inside of your brisket. If you make a little one, that's okay. You can work it out. I made a little bit of a one right here, but I can work it out. All right, just get it flat and work it right out. And this, work it right out. But as a matter of fact, what I really want to do is take this down a bit because it's just so big. I'm trying to give this a little bit more uniformity here. Little flaps, get rid of. Okay. Well, I think that does it, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope this video was helpful for you. If there's anything I missed or maybe that you'd want to see, let me know. If you'd like to see a video again of trimming and maybe you prefer the standard fixed way, I could do another one like that. Or maybe if you want to see something seasoning, cooking, anything related to something like that, then by all means, let me know. But all right, this bad boy is going to get seasoned. I'm going to probably just end it there. I think most of you people watching probably know how to season some meat, and that's not really super important. But now that we've got a great uniform trim, we can cook this confidently. It's going to cook even. Going to have a great bark development because we don't have uneven sides or dips and valleys or areas where it can pool. There's going to be some areas. Now I cook fat side up, if you're wondering, right? So I'm not too concerned with how the meat side lays, but I wanted to have balance and I wanted to have stability. So that way, as the brisket cooks, as the fat renders, it's only going to go one way, right? And like I said, sometimes briskets just, they come the way they come and there's nothing you can do about it. Like mine came with this and you can see it already made a hole. And I mean, you could fix that, but I'm going to lose a lot of uniformity trying to fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it like that. And then throughout the cook, you can just come in and just tip the brisket, right? If that starts to form a pool, any liquid or pocket of just fat, your bark's never going to develop. So you want to just tip it, come back in an hour, check it again. If it needs to be tipped again, just tip it. Tip it, or you can even rotate it, right? Rotate it around, tip it another way, tip it this way, whatever you need to do. It's totally okay to check on your meat. There are people that are like, no, don't open it. The pit's gone. I don't want to. Trust me, I've cooked a million briskets, especially my first one, and I panic checked it like every hour. It came out fine. I mean, you're not really going to, and I'm talking open it with the purpose, check it, close it. I'm not saying open it just to look at it because you're like, oh, that looks so cool, and just, leave it open and have a conversation for 10 minutes. Don't do that, but open it up, take a look at it, get the light on it, look around it real quick. Do you need to foil cap something? Do you need to rotate? Do you need to tip? Do you need to spritz? Whatever you need to do, it's totally okay to check. So, yeah, we're gonna work with this, and this should come out pretty good. It's a pretty heavily marbled brisket, but unfortunately, that was the best that they had at the store. If it was up to me, I would have gotten something a little bit smaller and probably a choice grade. I think a good quality choice is pretty hard to beat, although this is a prime. Prime is good just depending on where you got it, and this just wasn't a very good prime one. So, but we'll make it work. Thank y'all.